Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. Have you ever moved somewhere chasing a dream only to realize the real journey was finding yourself? Well, today on La Vie Creative, I'm joined by Dufflyn Lammers. She's a writer, speaker, and known as the American Love Coach in Paris. Her new book, You Had Me at Bonjour, is a genre-bending love story that explores romance, reinvention, and a powerful shift from fantasy to intimacy. I can't wait to share her story with you. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thanks so much for coming on. We had an amazing tea party with Amanda the other day, which reminded me of all the wonderful things you were doing, including your new book. But we'll get to that in a little bit. I always like to go back to the beginning and talk a little bit about what brought you to Paris.
Yeah. It's so funny how Paris has so many secret little hideaways, right? That to discover something new, like we did with that wonderful little coffee shop. And I remember the first time I came here, I was traveling by myself because my friend who I had scheduled the trip with canceled 3 days before we were scheduled to leave. And I had never really traveled alone. And I had the time of my life. So I fell in love with Paris immediately, and I'm still discovering it.
That's so funny. Are you still friends with that person?
At a distance.
So you've lived so many lives. You're an actress, writer, coach, and now an author. When you zoom out, what feels like the line connecting all these chapters?
Love. Always love. It's funny because when I was doing Poetry Slam, I did Poetry Slam for many years. And I would get up and I would try to do these political poems because I am, very much a feminist, and there are women's rights is sort of what I like to talk about when I talk about politics. And I would try to do these poems and talking about whatever's going on in the news as relates to that. And nobody wanted to hear any of it. But when I would talk about love, everybody's ears perked up. So I knew that that was my topic as a writer. And even as an actor, I was often cast as this sort of tragic romantic figure. So it's always kind of been the through line for me.
I think everyone loves love.
Yes, and why not?
So take us back to the moment when you left Hollywood for Paris. What were you running towards, and maybe what were you running away from?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I think I was at a transition in my life. It was a time where I was ready to let go of my dream of like being a famous actor, and I loved acting, and I fell in love with that craft. I fell in love with that craft, and I started acting as a way to become better at performing my poetry, and it worked. But then I went on this whole tangent, right, of being an actor. And there was something in it that it made me feel fully alive. And I really enjoyed that. But as I sort of matured, I began to understand that I wasn't really serving as much as I could, because here I am, on the set of Entourage doing 5 lines. Like, I'm not saving the world with that, right? And I just kind of felt like, right? Like, there's more that I can do. So at that same time, I had spent a summer in Paris, and I had met a handsome Frenchman, and we had been together at that point for about 3 years by the time I actually moved to Paris. And so I had a chance to kind of try them both out, him and the relationship as well as Paris. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to give this a go. Yeah, I think I'm ready for something new. I'm always in love with something new, anything new. That's my jam.
And it worked out. I mean, you've been here, 14 years now?
9 years that I've actually lived here, 12 years that he and I have been together.
Wow. And Paris has this mythology of reinvention. What did you believe your life would look like when you came to Paris?
It's funny because I had no idea. I just knew that it would be different. So what I'm always running towards is that something new, right? I remember there was this book, The Shock of the New. And that's what I'm always interested in because that's what makes me feel alive. And that's what I'm looking for. That's what I was looking for in poetry slam. That's what I was looking for in acting. That's what I was looking for in romance, and in travel. And that's the wonderful thing. Like what I'm saying about Paris is that it's constantly reinventing itself. And I think it sort of inspires that in others.
Yeah, I definitely believe that too. I mean, I've met so many people, including myself, that have come here with an idea of what they were going to be, and then something completely different happens.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There was what I did discover is that there's so much about who I thought I was that actually wasn't me, that was just kind of like a jacket that I put on because I was living in Los Angeles and I was living in America and I was living in a certain time period and moving to another country. I don't think it really matters where, but moving to another country gives you the opportunity to kind of take that jacket off and see what's underneath.
Yeah, definitely. No one telling you who you are. So let's talk about your new book, You Had Me at Bonjour. Your book explores this idea that the opposite of fantasy isn't reality, it's intimacy. Can you unpack that for us?
Yeah, I love this idea. And it wasn't until I finished writing the book that I came to that conclusion. But I think it's about intimacy with all things, right? So first intimacy with myself and sometimes in order to discover ourselves, we need to push up against something, whether that's a city or a job or a person or a book or a movie. I think that's why people read books and watch films and see art, right? Is to see who I am in relationship to this other. Um, and so the more I began to discover about that, because I'm a person who fantasy was sort of a coping mechanism for me as a young person, as a young woman, and for a long, for probably too long after that. And and it worked until it didn't. Until I came to a point where there was something I was longing for that I just didn't have, and I thought that it was about um, a sense of self, and maybe on some level it was. But once I had that, there was still something I was longing for, this intimacy with all things, which is kind of metaphysical and esoteric and spiritual. And at the same time, I think it resonates for a lot of people, especially in the world that we're living now in, where we feel so much disconnection.
Completely. And was there a moment in your relationship where you realized that maybe I've disappeared a little bit in this relationship? I know so many women suffer from that.
Absolutely. And I did that again and again and again throughout my lifetime, right? So this is the opportunity to say, okay, I'm not going to let that happen this time. And so and that's really challenging, as you know, when you move to another country, because you're kind of grasping for like, okay, who am I now? And that's part of reinvention. Part of reinvention is rediscovery of not only who am I, but who do I want to be? And right. And here's my chance to decide to make that a choice rather than someone telling me who I am. And you're also at the same time discovering this other person and discovering who you are in relationship with this other person. So I had to work really hard to have friends, to have, you know, activities, to have community where I could go to be in relationship with myself and relationship with others so that I had these other intimacies, so to speak, where I could discover myself and not lose myself. And that was a big thing. That was really hard. Like the first 3 years that I was here, I think a lot of expats go through that, no matter what country you're moving to, that just that feeling of getting a little bit lost and then getting a little bit found.
And what do you want people to walk away with from this book? What do you want them to learn or feel?
Well, more than anything, I think this book is about how love can bring us back to ourselves when we allow it to. And you know, I feel like this book is it's a self-help book disguised as a memoir, disguised as a novel. So there's all these different layers. And so different people might take away different things. I like to say it has the poetry and the edge of addiction memoirs, like The Chronology of Water, with the backdrop and the rom-com vibes of Emily in Paris. So those are two very different books and two very different genres, but they come together here in a way that I feel like is unique, and can be both very profound and also very lighthearted at the same time. So I hope that people will walk away knowing themselves better, because that's right, and feeling an intimacy with the book and with themselves and with wherever it is that they're going next.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. I mean, that's a great thing to walk away with. And you've been open about your journey with sobriety. How did that reshape the way you approach love and relationships?
I remember years ago, I was in a writing workshop with a woman named Rachel Resnick in Los Angeles, and she was sitting on my left, and on my right was this woman, Janet, who's a therapist. And so Rachel says, I believe that all addiction is attachment wounding. And the therapist says, oh, yeah, have you done an AAI? And I was like, wait, what? What's happening here? And that moment led me down this rabbit hole to examining how relationships are connected to addiction, because I knew already that relationships are one of the hardest things for people in recovery, but I didn't know why. And this thing about the attachment theory and attachment wounding, that gave me a little bit of a clue. And so I followed it, and I began studying attachment theory. I began noticing that the people in my recovery community who were having relapses or having a really hard time staying sober, oftentimes it was about relationships. They would get into a relationship, or they would be breaking up with someone, and they would have a really hard time regulating their emotions, and therefore they would turn back to whatever it was that was their drug of choice. And so that's intimately connected. And for me, it certainly was that way. We talk in addiction treatment about we treat whatever's primary. So if someone has, for example, a cocaine addiction and also an eating disorder, we look at, okay, what comes first, right? And if their eating disorder started when they were 13 years old, then that's what we would treat first. But attachment wounding happens in the first 2 years of your life. So it's absolutely primary. It's absolutely the first thing that needs to be treated. And so it just made sense to me. The more that I learned, like I said, I went down this rabbit hole. I'm still in it. I'm still learning more. And so for me, that's just intimately connected, but it's also connected with creativity, and it's also connected with writing. Because one of the ways to heal from attachment wounding is to be able to form a coherent narrative of your life, right? So that coherency of mind that comes when someone is able to mentalize, other words for that might be mindfulness or metacognition, just thinking about thinking, which is what we do on the page, especially when we're writing memoir. So it really all kind of came together for me in this book.
Thinking about thinking, I like that. So You Had Me at Bonjour blends a real life with surreal, almost magical elements. Why did the story need to be told that way?
I'm in love with magic, and I feel like I never want for myself and for everyone, for the groundedness and the healing that we all want in different ways, to exclude magic or romance or whimsical ideas, right? Like that's what I love about things like Emily in Paris. You know, I love serendipity, and I love magical thinking. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with magical thinking, but it's not the same as fantasy, right? And recognizing it and being able to allow for the mystery, right? Like the great mysteries of life. And love is one of those.
Definitely, love can definitely be mysterious.
Right? Like who knows? Keep trying to define it, and let's see what we come up with next.
And what did writing the book reveal to you that living it didn't?
Well, here's what I'll say about that. An autobiography is the story of your life. A memoir is a story from your life. And so writing the book, writing memoir is very difficult. I remember when I was in Mexico City, I saw Gabriel Garcia Marquez speak, which was a great gift. And he's one of my favorite writers. And I remember he was writing his memoirs at the time, and he said it was the most difficult thing he ever had to write. And part of the reason is because we have to figure out what to leave out and what to leave in. And in the process of that, I got to kind of separate this story from myself and from all of these other stories. And I believe that, as Joseph Campbell says, the mythologist, he talks about how there's really only one story. And have you ever heard the Golden Buddha story?
No, not at all.
Okay, so the story of the Golden Buddha is there's a man living in this village, and he goes to the temple all the time, and he prays to the giant golden Buddha that they have in the temple. And one day he hears that there's a war coming. And so all of the people of the village, he goes out and he gets them, and he's like, we've got to hide the golden Buddha because it's their most precious possession. And so they get a bunch of mud and straw and they pack it on the golden Buddha so that you can't tell it's there, and they hide it, and the war comes. And there's suffering, and it lasts for a long time. And the people are tired and exhausted, and they forget all about the golden Buddha. And then finally, the war is over, the armies go home. And one day this man is again sitting in the temple praying, and this like crust of mud falls on his head. And he looks up and he sees a little fleck of gold, and he starts to peel away the mud and discover what's underneath. And he runs outside and he gets the people, and he's like, come, you have to help me. You won't believe what I've discovered. And they tear away all the mud and the straw, and there it is, the golden Buddha. And it was there all along. And so that's what our story is, right? As humans, is that process of trying to look deeper and discover our true nature, our essential selves. For me, that's what writing is about. That's what storytelling is about in many ways. And especially through this story for me, about love bringing us back to ourselves. I didn't know that that was what this book was going to be about. I didn't know that was what this relationship was going to be about. How could I? But that's what was revealed to me along the way. And this idea of intimacy being the opposite of fantasy, but also still allowing for the magic and the discovery and the mystery.
Yeah, I love that. The Golden Buddha. And it is funny when we start writing memoir, we have no idea where it's going to lead us or what it's going to open up. It's like reliving some trauma sometimes. So it's good for self-discovery. If you want to discover yourself, write a memoir.
Yeah, absolutely. And I discovered so much about my partner by writing the memoir, because I would go to him and I would be like, hey, do you remember this scene? Do you remember when we were at the beach in Gallipoli, which is one of the final scenes in the book? And the way he saw it might have been different from the way I saw it. But through the process of writing the book, I got to ask him questions about it. And it led me to a better understanding of, kind of what was going on in his mind and what was going on in my mind. And, the truth is somewhere in the middle.
So was there a part of the book that felt especially vulnerable or scary to share publicly?
The whole thing. The whole thing is incredibly, which I didn't think would be, because my whole life I've been, performing slam poems. I did a one-woman show. I published a lot of personal essays. They're all deeply vulnerable and deeply personal. And yet this in particular, I think partly because this is my deepest relationship. This is my partner. This is the person that I go to sleep next to every night. And sharing that with the world is the most personal thing I could share. And and sharing it in a way that's just deeply honest. Because here's the deal, right? Like I've been realizing this just again and again, it keeps happening. There are a lot of relationship gurus out there, right? People who are, whether they're a therapist or they're a writer or they're whatever way they come to us. And these people have great wisdom to share. And now that I've met many of them, I see how we're also just imperfect humans, right? Like nobody has it figured out. Nobody has it figured out. And so to allow myself to be that as well, allow myself to step forward with the wisdom that I do have, but also allow myself to just be a vulnerable human with flaws and questions is challenging for me because I'm a perfectionist. So I don't know if you can relate to that.
Definitely. I think when it comes to work, perfectionism is a problem.
Exactly.
So what do you hope women, especially those struggling in love, feel when they read your story?
Hope. Above all else, hope that it doesn't have to be perfect, that it's good enough for us to show up and do the work together, and that love is messy and tender and worth doing the work.
And you coach women all over the world. What are some of the most common patterns you see when it comes to love?
So one of the most common things I see is that we chase what's unavailable. And coming to the realization that the reason we're chasing what's unavailable is because of the ways that we ourselves are unavailable is one of the greatest things that can happen to a woman who's looking for love. So I see that pattern a lot, and I watch it happen again and again where they realize, oh, hi, I'm the problem. It's me. And not that it's a problem, right? Because really it just is what it is. But given the opportunity to take responsibility for ourselves, we become empowered. So I love watching that pattern play out. And I think there are also a lot of us who have settled in certain ways. I've worked with a lot of women also helping them leave a relationship and looking at, okay, are you growing with this person or are you going apart from this person, and why? Who are you now? And watching them have that opportunity to be true to themselves. Because I think there's also a lot of women who, they did choose the nice guy. They chose the safe guy. They chose the person who would be a good provider and a good dad. And then somewhere along the line, they come to this place where they're like, I want more. And I think it's okay to allow ourselves that, whether that happens in that relationship or they leave the relationship, that's up to them, but allowing themselves to reach for more, whatever that is.
So what does choosing intimacy actually really look like in everyday life?
I think that's about being willing and being honest and being open-minded. So, for example, my partner and I remember one day we were on our way across town to go meet some friends for dinner at their house. And we were riding bikes, which, as you know, riding bikes in Paris is both a pleasure and a terror. Because, right? Because it's just, there's people honking at you and, so I was a little bit triggered when we got off our bikes, and I had felt scared, and it was hard for me to follow him, and and I was like, you weren't waiting for me, and just feeling really vulnerable. And so we stopped and we parked our bikes, and I was like walking behind him, and before we went in, I stopped and I was like, hey, I need a hug. And he was like, okay, and he like gave me a quick hug, and I was like, no, I need a longer hug. And so then he like held me and he gave me a longer hug, and he's like, what is it? And I told him. And to me, that's intimacy, just like allowing myself to be honest about what's happening with me, and then being willing to ask for what I need, to know what I need, and being willing to ask for it. And then also being open to the way the other person responds, right? And that's part of what makes a relationship work is, can that other person meet you in that moment when you are being vulnerable? When they do, and you get to feel seen, that's what creates intimacy.
I love that. Yeah, but sometimes we all just need a hug after a Paris bike ride.
Right.
So for the women listening who feels like she'll never find love or herself, what would you want her to hear?
Don't give up on you, baby. You're worth it.
That's so true. We're all worth it, ladies and men.
Yeah.
And after everything you lived, what does love mean to you now?
I think a lot of it is about acceptance, accepting who I am and accepting the other person in front of me. What isn't love is trying to force someone to be who you want them to be in order for you to feel the way you want to feel. And I think that was part of the lesson that I learned in this book. And so now coming to a place where I really have this sort of equanimity, and I can accept myself and others, not just my partner, but my family members, my friends, the world as it is, gives me so much peace, right? And not just this romantic love, but all the different kinds of love.
All the love. I like that. And why do you think so many of us are conditioned to chase intensity over true intimacy?
Well, isn't that just so reinforced by like popular culture in so many different ways? You look at like Sex and the City, right? The precursor to Emily in Paris, and Big and Carrie. What a toxic romance that was. And yet we see that, and we all think that this is what it's supposed to look like, right? At any given moment, there's 15 different rom-coms out there showing this same pattern where it's like they meet, they fall in love, and then they get separated. And there's this heartbreak, and then they come back together. So we think that that's the pattern of romantic love and what it's supposed to look like. So there's that. And then on top of it, people who have insecure attachment, which is about 50% of the world population, are already conditioned by their childhood development to feel that way. So I think there's a lot of different reasons why it happens, but those two things in particular are definitely playing a part.
So much trauma in our lives.
Yeah, right. And because love is the thing underneath it that protects us from trauma, and that's scientifically proven. I worked with a man named Dan Brown who did a study about soldiers, and the soldiers going off to war who had secure attachment before they left to go off to war were much less likely to come home with PTSD than the ones who didn't have insecure attachment.
Yeah, we definitely have to work on these things so that we can be okay in all parts of our life.
Yes, but the good news is that we can, that there is a solution, that there is a way to repair all of that. And I hope that people are also inspired to do that if they see themselves in some of the earlier chapters of my book, and they feel like they could do better. They can, because sometimes we have this thing. I like to say, you know better, but you can't do better, but you can. You just need to do the work.
And what's some things that people can do today to work on themselves?
I think many times, especially for women who want to have a healthy relationship, who want to end that struggle to love and be loved, it's about prioritizing ourselves in many ways. Because like we talked about, right, it's so easy to lose yourself in relationships, even if you don't have a relationship, even if you're just dating, even if you just want to be dating, it's so easy to lose ourselves in that. But when we prioritize ourselves and we really create a life that we love, then we have a strong foundation to be in a relationship. And that includes my relationship with work and my relationship with my family and my relationship with my friends, as well as a romantic relationship. But just knowing like who I am and what I need, and then committing to that, like with everything I have, for me, that's the ticket.
Well, I think that is a beautiful note to end on. Your book, You Had Me at Bonjour, is a reminder that love isn't about perfection or fantasy. It's about presence, truth, and coming home to yourself. So thank you so much for being here. And where can people pick up the book and connect with you?
So You Had Me at Bonjour will be released by Rise Books with distribution from Simon & Schuster June 4th, and it will be available on Amazon or wherever you buy books. And I hope to hear from some of you. If you've heard about the book here and you read the book, I would love to hear what your thoughts are and continue this conversation.
Thanks so much for tuning in to La Vie Creative. You can find more information on MissParisPhoto.com. And if you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word for all my creative guests. We have the power to help them to keep doing what they love. See you next time.